Hi, I'm Rob, a Washington, D.C. tour guide. I've stopped here at the Washington Monument on my way to the airport. I've got a GoPro camera mounted to the front of a Capital Bikeshare bike, so let me take you along for the ride to catch my flight.
And we're off. I'm starting here at the Washington Monument because it's a famous landmark. It's right in the middle of the city. It's an easy reference point for people to understand how to get from downtown DC to the airport. And I'll actually edit on a map that shows you the route I'm going to take to get to the airport. As you should be able to see, it's more or less a straight shot to the south, and I think it should take me about 15 to 20 minutes to get there. Now, when I mention biking to the airport, I usually get one of three reactions. The first is, wait, you can bike to the airport? And the answer to that one, at least in this case, is yes. We're going to do it today. You can definitely bike to the airport. The second reaction is, who bikes to the airport? Well, I bike to the airport. Some of my friends bike to the airport. Obviously, this is a small, niche group, but it's not nobody. People bike to the airport. In a way, it's kind of like asking who takes a limousine to the airport. Well, not me, not most people, but not nobody. So it's a small niche group, but it's not nobody either. And the third reaction is, isn't it completely unrealistic to bike to the airport? What about your luggage? And that's true. What about luggage? If you have a lot of luggage, it's gonna be hard to bike to the airport. Biking is really only realistic if you're traveling light. Now, the trip I am taking right now is a short trip, only one night in my destination, and I am also generally a light packer, so I was able to pack everything that I need for this trip into a backpack, which is on my back right now. So yes, if you're traveling with a 50-pound suitcase, obviously you're not going to be biking to the airport. But if you're traveling light, you're taking a short trip, then it's definitely possible and it's definitely doable. Now let's talk about today. It is a beautiful fall weather day here in Washington, D.C. It's November, which means it was a bit chilly this morning, but it's warmer now. It's sweater weather or hoodie weather, depending on what you prefer, and that is what you saw me wearing when I did my little intro back at the Washington Monument. November also means that there are still a decent number of leaves on the trees, but also quite a few leaves on the ground. And people ask me if DC has fall colors, and the answer to that is definitely yes. But the timing might not be what you think. So I suspect if I asked a random person, when do you think the fall color change happens? Most people would probably say September or October. And that's true farther to the north, because the way that color change works is it happens earlier in the north, it happens later in the south. So if you're way up in Maine or Vermont or any of the places up there, you're going to get fall colors potentially weeks earlier than you are down here. In DC, at least in the city, I find that we usually get peak color in late October, around Halloween. So either the week before or the 2 weeks before Halloween, you're typically going to find the best fall colors. But it's November now, and as you just saw, and we'll surely see again once we get over to the park on the other side of the bridge, there are a lot of nice fall colors still happening even in November. Now last year, 2024, we had a spectacular fall. We had some of the best colors I have ever seen. This year, 2025, a little less spectacular, a little less colorful, a little more muted. And I was reading that the reason for that is because last year was a bit wetter, this year is drier. I wouldn't say last year was wet, last year was kind of more average, and this year is more dry than average. Now this path I'm taking right now, this is a path that goes around the Jefferson Memorial. So I took it down 15th Street from the Washington Monument. Now we're rounding and going past the Jefferson Memorial, which is up on the right. As a tour guide, I take this path frequently. I need to get to the Jefferson Memorial for tours quite often, and so I am very familiar with this bike ride. But once we get to the end of the little bike path here, we're going to turn up on the left, and we are going to make our way over to the 14th Street Bridge. Like I said, I am riding a Capital Bikeshare bike to the airport. There's two types of Capital Bikeshare bikes. There's the red bikes, which are called the classic bikes, and the silver bikes, which are the electric bikes. I'm actually on an electric Capital Bikeshare bike today, and I would actually recommend that if you're taking Capital Bikeshare to the airport, because for the one reason that you do not have to end your ride in a dock. On a red classic bike you do, on a silver electric bike you do not, and that can be very important if there's not an open dock. We'll see if there is when I get there. So we've just pulled up onto the 14th Street Bridge. Now I'm referring to it in the singular, 14th Street Bridge, but it's actually a bridge complex that consists of 5 separate bridges that carry all kinds of traffic. So if you zoom in really closely on Google Maps, you'll see, oh, there's actually quite a few distinct bridges here. So we have the Arland Williams Memorial Bridge, the Rambakbao Bridge, sorry, I'm probably butchering that French pronunciation, and the George Mason Memorial Bridge, which all carry vehicular traffic. And I am currently biking on the outside of the George Mason Memorial Bridge. So if you are crossing the bridge on foot or on bike, this is the place where you have to do it, on the outside of the George Mason Memorial Bridge. There's also the Long Bridge, which carries freight trains, Amtrak trains, and Virginia Railway Express commuter trains. And finally, the Charles Fenwick Bridge is for Metro Yellow Line trains. This is a historically significant bridge because it was the first bridge built in the DC area, called the Long Bridge, and it opened in 1809, right after Washington, D.C. became the capital. It also played a critical role during the Civil War, serving as a supply line into Washington, D.C. And there's currently a major project underway called the Long Bridge Project, which will create a continuous 4-track rail corridor between Virginia and D.C., which includes new rail bridges and new pedestrian and bicycle bridges. When it's finished, this bike ride will look a lot different, and it will be a lot more pleasant than it was crossing right there, because I will no longer have to cross the bridge wedged up against an interstate and fast-moving traffic. I'm actually going to try to edit on a rendering of what the new bridge is going to look like so that you can see. The renderings look very cool, and I am very excited to eventually get to ride on that new bicycle bridge. Okay, now we've turned onto the Mount Vernon Trail. So since we're across the bridge, we're going to take the Mount Vernon Trail the rest of the way to the airport. It's called the Mount Vernon Trail, named, of course, after Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, which is the terminus of the trail. The trail itself runs from Roslyn, which is north of here, all the way to Mount Vernon, with a break in Alexandria where you have to take city streets to connect between the sections of the trail. If you want to see this trail in greater depth, I actually posted and recorded about a year ago a full-blown ride from the Lincoln Memorial all the way to Old Town Alexandria. It's a great bike ride, so if you want to see the trail, you want to learn about the trail, check out the video description. I will leave a link to that video bike ride down there. This type of trail is called a multi-use trail, which means it's for people doing all kinds of different activities, including but not limited to walking, hiking, running, biking, pushing a stroller, walking a dog, all kinds of different activities, and it's all shared amongst those users. The first trail section opened in the 1970s. It was a gravel path, but over the years it has been paved and improved, and I am very grateful for that. It's one of the most popular trails in the DC area, and on nice weather days, and especially on weekends, it can get quite busy and crowded. Today, it's not so busy, and I will explain exactly why that may be the case in a little bit. So we are now in Gravelly Point Park. This park is located just to the north of the airport, and it is famously known as one of the best places in the United States to watch planes take off and land up close. Due to its proximity to the airport, planes fly extremely low over the park, creating an exciting experience for aviation enthusiasts, photographers, families with kids who are really into airplanes. The park also offers excellent views of the Washington, D.C. skyline, including the Washington Monument and the Capitol building. However, you will not see that on this bike ride because to get those stunning views, you need to do this ride in reverse, going from the airport towards DC. So we're not going to see that today, but you'll have to take my word for it that it is a very nice skyline view. The park is a big open field. It's great for picnicking, for bringing a ball and playing catch, for tossing around a frisbee, kicking a soccer ball, any other kind of casual sports. Now, DCA, the airport, it only has one runway, so which direction the planes take off and land depends on the wind conditions on any given day. And today, I believe the wind conditions are such that planes are landing from the north, which means, I can hear one coming up. I don't know if the camera's gonna be able to pick it up, but there is a plane flying directly over my head right now. And so if you want to see the planes really up close, I highly recommend trying to come on a day when they are landing from the north, because when they take off, they have really steep ascents, and so you can't always get quite as close. Now, if you're wondering, up here on the left, why this giant parking lot is completely empty, the reason is because I am recording this during the government shutdown. So the federal government shutdown is getting close to the longest in history. It has been going on for over a month. It has been absolutely brutal for DC tourism. I can say, as a tour guide and owner of a tour company, that October last month was the worst October for TripHacks DC tours ever. Almost as bad as 2020, the year of COVID. I mean, it was just absolutely brutal. And so government shutdowns have all kinds of impacts on tourism, on everyday life, and one of the smaller, but if this matters to you, important impacts is that you can't go to Gravelly Point Park unless you arrive on foot or on bike. That is the one good thing, is that you can still go, you just have to arrive on foot or on bike. You cannot drive. The parking lot is closed. We are now approaching the airport. This airport is formally named Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Locals call it National or National Airport. Tourists tend to call it Reagan or Reagan Airport. Airplane enthusiasts call it by its three-letter code, DCA. And as a local, I will usually call it National with my family and friends. But as the face of TripHacks DC Tours, I will sometimes call it by its full official name, Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. I will never, however, call it simply Reagan. Okay, it opened in 1941 as Washington National Airport. The Ronald Reagan part was added in 1998, basically for political reasons. And because this was an act of Congress that locals did not ask for, a lot of them resisted the name change back in the 90s. Many of them still resist the name change even to this day. And I will say, naming aside, it is one of the most convenient airports in the entire country. I believe some cities have airports that are a little bit closer to their downtowns, but this airport is extremely convenient, not just because it's close to downtown, but because it has metro access directly at the terminal. So if you hit the connections right, you can go door to gate from downtown DC to the airport gate in 30 minutes or less using metro, which is amazing. If you bike to the airport like we're doing right now, you can get here in 15 to 20 minutes. I think we're going to wind up getting to the Capital Bikeshare station in less than 20 minutes, and then the walk from the parking garage to the terminal is probably 5 minutes at most, although I will not be showing that because I don't want to be walking around the airport with a camera. So I will end it once we get to the Bikeshare stations. It is a architecturally beautiful airport, the Great Hall being especially nice. Now, it is very close to the city, and it is at capacity, basically. This has been controversial for many reasons. A lot of people have safety concerns. A lot of people have concerns about delays, the fact that there's far more demand for this airport than it can accommodate, since it, like I said, only has the one runway. There have been several tragic incidents at this airport, but before I tell you about those, can I just say, look at these leaves. This is about the best fall color you're gonna see. Look at this, amazing. That's why I love biking to the airport. You're not gonna get these views in an Uber. And you're not gonna get it on the Metro, even though I do like the Metro and use it often. This is spectacular. So you probably remember, it wasn't even more than a year ago, on January 29th, 2025, a regional jet carrying 64 people collided with a US Army helicopter causing both aircrafts to crash into the Potomac River. Another incident many years ago, on January 13th, 1982, following a period of exceptionally cold weather and a morning blizzard, Air Florida Flight 90 took off after waiting nearly an hour on the taxiway, during which time ice and snow built up on the wings of the plane. Once it tried to take off, it failed to gain altitude and it crashed into the 14th Street Bridge, the bridge that we just crossed. Anyway, let's pull off the trail and head towards the airport itself. Now, if you weren't paying close attention, you might have missed that turnoff. It was not particularly well marked. That's one of my few criticisms of the Mount Vernon Trail. They're not always the most well marked. So I highly recommend consulting your map, whether that's Google Maps, Apple Maps, or whatever you're using to navigate yourself to the airport, so that you don't miss that turnoff, because it can be a bit frustrating if you do. We're going to go down this ramp, then we're going to go into the tunnel, and we have to go into this tunnel because we need to get to the other side of the service road that people use when they're accessing the airport, and crossing that at grade would be quite dangerous. So thankfully this little tunnel is here that if you're on foot or on bike, you can use to get to the other side of the service road. Once we get to the top of the ramp, you'll be able to see the parking garage. Now, I took a Capital Bikeshare bike today. You can also take your own bike. If you are a local, you can take your own bike and do this ride with your own bike. There is a parking area inside of the parking garage where you can lock it up. Now, make sure you bring a very solid lock. I personally prefer Capital Bikeshare because I don't always trust locking my bike in a public place for long periods of time. Just a paranoia I've always had, but it is an option. So here it is, the Capital Bikeshare station at the airport, and lucky for us, I see 3 open docks over here on the end. So we will just go ahead and pull in, and that's it. So once we are finished with the ride, we'll just walk through the airport, follow the signs as if we were parked, follow the signs to the terminal, and that will be it. So I'm curious, if you made it this far, let me know. Have you ever biked to the airport? Have you ever biked to this airport? Did you know you could bike to the airport? Leave a comment and let me know. And as I say at the end of all of these, enjoy your trip.